So this is across contact center and CX. 80% of respondents said that C-level executives are expecting them to make more use of AI. I think actually 11% said, I don't know. And only 9% said that execs aren't putting pressure on them to use AI.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Deep Learning with PolyAI, the only podcast where both host and guest have run competing surveys, and we're going to dish on all the data today. I'm joined by Kylie Whitehead, who's our Senior Director of Brand here at PolyAI. How you doing?
Yeah, good, thank you. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. But as mentioned, we did both conduct surveys over the holiday season here, and we're going to share some of the info that you had specifically in our 2025 Customer Trends Report that just published. Go check it out. It's at our website, poly.ai. Really interesting little nuggets. And I find that the questions that you asked and sort of the data landscape that you were able to pull from was really diverse. So can you tell us a little bit about the methodology, why we decided to do this trends report?
Yeah, I really wanted us to, we speak to a lot of companies every day. Obviously, that's what we do. We have a lot of great brands who use PolyAI to answer phone calls every single day. But I wanted to get a bit more of a broader picture of people outside of our kind of universe, I guess, and understand what contact center leaders and CX leaders are really thinking about in the next year, what they're prioritizing and what their goals are. Um, and so, yeah, here we are.
Here we are. So we interviewed both CX leaders and contact center leaders in North America, UK, kind of getting a across the ocean perspective. Let's talk
Yeah.
about some of the findings. I know that a lot of the survey was around, and some of the most significant identified trends were around sort of evolution of job role within the contact center as it exists now, but also within CX leadership. And there seems to be a bit of a trend towards a merging of those responsibilities. Tell us a little bit about what you found with regards to CX leaders, contact center leaders, and how they may be the same in the future.
Yeah, there's a bit of a shift on both sides, and I guess I should sort of start with the fact that we know about 50% of respondents were contact center leaders, the other 50% were CX leaders. Now, whether or not CX is looking after the contact center really depends on company to company. So we don't
Sure.
really know too much about the crossover there. But of the contact center leaders, so people who specifically manage the contact center, 75% said they see themselves in a CX leadership position in the next 5 years. So they were going from something like director of call center or head of contact center, a title like that, into head of customer experience or chief customer officer. They saw themselves moving in that direction. And I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Because contact center directors really do see themselves and their teams as the voice of the company to
Sure.
the customer. Like they are providing the most sort of one-to-one interactions with the customer. If you think of websites and apps and things, you're really not having a personal experience there, where in the contact center you are.
No, the engagement experience is completely different, and in a
Yeah.
world that's steadily moving towards, whether because of global pandemics or just natural consumer behavior, that when you're interacting with who become your favorite brands, even on a consumer level, most often than not, if you have a person-to-person touch point, it's gonna be through the contact center because we're in an e-commercialized world, and that makes a lot of sense. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the folks who are staffing the brick and mortars anymore. It's the people who are in your contact center that are gonna be, honestly, the first voice and face that a lot of the customers experience.
Yeah, and the contact center, is understood in a lot of cases by executive teams as being a cost center, right? We
Sure.
did have a stat on that. I don't have the number off the top of my head, but a lot of people agreed with that. And so again, I think it makes sense that these people running the contact centers and maybe feeling like they're not necessarily being appreciated for the customer relationships that they're owning. And so they see themselves moving in this direction of CX, where really owning those the whole customer experience
Yeah.
is something that they kind of deserve because they're the ones who know the customer best.
They deserve it, and they deserve an environment in which it's maximized, because if you're looking
Yeah.
at the cost center, or if you're looking at the contact center as, a cost center, then it's a constant grind. It's dealing with oversaturation of incoming calls. It's dealing with operational efficiencies, and that doesn't necessarily co-align with a great customer experience. So
Yeah.
people need to like really choose one side of the fence or the other. It seems like the trend is moving towards, okay, this is an actual business driver, which validates what we've
Yeah.
been saying about the contact center and evolutions in the technology and tools that are utilized there. So, well, that's good
Yeah.
to hear. What about on the other side? What about CX leaders finding more responsibility with AI? What about AI within
Yeah.
the general enterprise application?
So, I mean, with the CX leaders, it kind of comes as no surprise that a lot of them were, either wanting to stay in their role as head of CX or director of CX or VP of CX or chief customer officer. So they were kind of mostly seeing themselves moving up the ladder.
Sure.
But 12% of CX leaders said they saw their role changing to head of AI in 5 years. And I think that's
Really?
really interesting. Yeah, because they're moving from, a very customer centric role. And I will say CX is, it really quite a technical role because you're looking at all of the different touch points that you have with customers, which more often than not these days are going to be digital, right? They're going to be on technology driven
Sure.
channels. Um, but yeah, really interesting that this growing proportion, and I'll be interested to see how this changes next year when we run the survey again to see if this number goes up or down. But again, it kind of makes sense, right? Because AI is getting injected into more and more parts of the customer experience. And I think if you are the person that owns the customer experience today, you want to make sure that the way that this technology is being injected is doing so, it's being done so in a way that really benefits the customer and improves the experience and isn't just an efficiency play.
Very true. On the other hand, or on the other side of things, from a business perspective, there's so much data and analytics that go into what these tools are able to gather that it does kind of lend more towards technical proficiencies and data architecting, storage management, and the
Yeah.
like. So that does make a little bit of sense. I'm interested as to why it's only 12%. Do you think that 12% of those respondents already have some sort of responsibility uh, within a technical realm at their organizations?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, not all of these leaders they have varying levels of familiarity, I guess, with different AI tools. And
Sure.
so I'm not saying that 88%, I can't do my math, 88%, don't have AI.
You got it. Nice. That adds up to 100.
Um, exactly. But I think that in a you also have to think about how enterprises are using AI, and the customer facing applications of AI is only one part of it. There's a whole lot of other bits within the organization of where, sorry, departments are using AI, but
Sure.
in different ways. And so maybe some of these CX leaders as well are like, yeah, well, it's not AI that I want to be in charge of, it's CX that I want to be in charge of. And the way, I want to be able to oversee the way AI is being used in the
Mhm.
customer journey. So again, I'm interested to see how this would look next year because it could go up, right? Because AI can be a bigger part of customer experience, or it could go down because AI is too general. It's like having a head of JavaScript or something.
Yeah,
It's
sure.
very general, and
Um,
AI is really a tool, right? It's not a department.
or it could go down because at the current pace of adoption, how it's like skyrocketing, maybe those people have already moved into the role. And so
Yeah,
they don't see themselves as moving into because they're already there, you know? So
yeah.
we'll see. We'll see how that
And
works
I
out.
know you did a recent episode of this podcast about the sort of chief AI officer and
Yeah.
the roles. And I think as I've seen these titles popping up on LinkedIn, it really varies who is in that seat. Is it a technical person? Is it a product person? Is it a commercial person? Is it a legal
Right.
compliance person? That sort of head of AI role still seems, that there isn't a, I guess, typical set of requirements or
No,
job
it's pretty
description.
nebulous. It's pretty diverse,
Yeah.
definitely, the folks who are stepping into that role. Also, because it's
Yeah.
so new. So it's like it could depend from industry to industry or from
Yeah.
business operations, like in processes that are in place. Like maybe AI
Yeah.
is more integrated. So regardless of whether or not these leaders are kind of overseeing CX moving into more AI and moving into more to CX, what we do see and what's been shown from this survey is that there's a lot of executive influence coming down. You got a very interesting stat with regards to what percentage of these AI initiatives are coming from the top and sort of, or what percentage of executives or within our responding organizations are coming down. Can you share a little bit about that info?
Yeah, so 80% of respondents, so this is across contact center and CX, 80% of respondents said that C-level executives are expecting them to make more use of AI. I think actually 11% said, I don't know, and only 9% said that execs aren't putting pressure on them to use AI.
Really?
I think this is really interesting. I think that there is a trend currently of the sort of higher ups in a business, your exec team, your boards to say, how are we going to use AI? I want to use generative AI. I want to use agentic AI. What are we doing about it? And then it's sort of on these department heads to think, well, how do I implement a technology rather than how do I solve a problem with the right technology?
Right.
Kind of matching it in a backwards way.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you think maybe that's influenced by, sort of the back of the airline seat magazine? Oh, I just read about it, so we should look into it. And the fact that the evolution of consumer AI applications has been so prevalent. I mean, we've come a long way since first Siri, obviously with the GPT boom. We're seeing more consumer like involvement with what's possible with generative and LLMs. Is that driving this? It more of a consumer mindset making business decisions?
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. Like obviously, AI is just part of the culture these days. Like we're
Sure.
all thinking about it, we're all talking about it to different degrees. A lot of these businesses have probably had to implement AI regulations, right? So there, I've read in the news about certain companies who have to tell their employees, don't put our sensitive data into ChatGPT.
Right. Correct.
And so we've sort of gone through this set of change where executives have had to understand that people are using tools like ChatGPT to make their everyday lives easier, inside work and outside work. So
So
it's
not
definitely
only so not only like consumer exposure, but also the workforce management piece of these tools that can very easily put sensitive corporate data out into the world potentially.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. And then you've got smart assistants like Siri and Alexa have been around for a long time now,
long
right?
time.
And
Yeah.
become part of the conversation. I guess when ChatGPT entered the room, it really it made us all go, "Huh, okay." You
Mhm.
know, conversational AI can be good. I like to think that we were leading that at PolyAI as well, but we're specifically focused in the customer
Right.
service sector, whereas as ChatGPT sort of brought it to the masses. And so I do think this consumer angle is part of it, but I also think that you're seeing a lot more executives talking about how they're using AI in their organizations. So you'll see them kind of talking about it on LinkedIn. There's kind of a bragging rights to being, the first people to bring, an AI agent to market in your specific industry. Uh, and so I think there is, a little bit of like peer pressure, a
Yeah.
little bit of
No, it
as
totally
well.
makes sense.
Yeah,
And that's nothing new, right? Whether it was cloud
yeah,
computing, whether it's something like AI. Obviously, there are trend jumpers who are just they want to be the
yeah,
first at no matter the risk. Then there are the folks who are sort of mid ground, wait for your neighbors to do the thing. It's like a high school prom, right?
yeah,
Everyone wants to dance. No one's taking the first steps, but then as soon as someone goes out and breaks that ice, then all of a sudden everyone sort of swarms the floor. And I think that's what we're
yeah.
seeing now, or is a lot of moving in. So it sounds like there's this like herd mentality of, okay, we've seen a couple instances where this has really taken off. We should be doing this too, so we don't fall too far behind.
Yeah, and I don't think it's just people kind of hopping on the bandwagon and wanting the credit and that sort of
No,
thing. I think that there are, it's not for every brand to take that risk. It is not you don't want your you probably don't want your bank, to be taking the same risks that maybe like your favorite clothing retailer to take because you sort of expect different things from these brands. And so I think that a lot of these leaders will be seeing, okay, this stuff is working. Like it's working, it's reliable. People are pretty happy with this. And now I'm ready. Now this has sort of been de-risked to a degree. I'm ready now to take that move and move my brand into it.
that makes sense. Um, the difference between something like finance from a regulatory perspective and retail is high, but then also I feel like from a consumer angle, the entrenchment in things like, a medical practitioner, the entrenchment in things like where you bank is going to be a little bit more firm and solidified as opposed to
Yeah.
where you buy your shirts from. There are some, retail loyalists out there. I think Nicola has now pitched the pullover sweater shirt provider that or manufacturer that he buys. He's like, this is all I own. It's all I'll ever own. So we know that he's loyal for life, but not everyone can
Yeah.
say that. As a matter of fact, we've had previous surveys and we've seen previous surveys where like 60% of consumers will abandon a brand after one bad experience. And that's crazy. So the
Yeah.
volatility is there. What is some of the information that you think that this trends report floated with regards to consumer behavior, both in commercialization transactions and their willingness when it comes to they have an issue to do things like chatting with a bot versus a human, or what are the expectations there?
Yeah. So again, we only really have the word of these CX and contact center leaders
Hmm.
to go off. Um, but these people are also consumers, right? It's not like they live in this vacuum where all they are doing is being the contact center director at X retailer. They are also consumers. So I think that's something interesting to keep in mind. So we did ask them, why do you think your customers might want to talk to a person instead of AI? And we asked this question because you hear it in poly AI deployments, even where people will say, I want to talk to an agent, agent, I
Right,
want
right,
to talk to
right.
a person. Don't even give it a chance, right? They're just like, no, I want to go and speak to a person. So we wanted to know, why CX leaders thought this might be happening. And there's kind of two big answers here. So 77% said that they think customers think a person would understand them better. And I think this
So
is
that's the rationale, is just understanding that sort of first
just
touch. Yeah,
understanding them
right.
better. And I think this can come on, we didn't get that deep with the question, and I would love to dive deeper, but I think there are two parts of understanding, right? One is literal. So if you're talking about the phone in particular, so you're talking about voice AI
Mhm.
agents, it's literally understanding what they're saying. How many times have you spoken to an Alexa or an automated system and you've said something and it's just like, "Sure, I'll play Taylor Swift," and you're like, "What? That's not what I said." Right?
Oh,
How
I think we've highlighted more than a few pop culture references as to how often that Siri messes things up.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It is so common. It's such a common joke
Yeah.
in uh, everything today. Um, and so I think literal understanding is one part of it. Again, with chatbots, right? You type something in, um, and it says, "I don't know what you're talking about." And you're like, "Well, I just told you what I was talking about."
It's
Turns
in
out what
black
you
and
wanted
white.
was a
It's the
button. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and then I think the other side of understanding is feeling understood, right? Like, does
Sure,
this thing understand my problem? Because when I talk to customer service, I will often just give way too much information because I just want to like get it off my chest and make it someone else's problem.
sure.
Uh, and then 68% of people said that they think a person is more empathetic slash open to negotiating. And I think this is um, maybe a polite way of saying it's easier to manipulate a person into doing what you want them to do. And I think again,
From a
that was
security concern, that floats high because obviously social
yeah,
engineering is like one of the chief vehicles for the data
yeah,
hacking of personal information, and we've seen a lot of high profile cases where that's where ransomware comes into play. It's just like, hey, I the way I got access to this is by emotionally finagling one of your people.
yeah,
Period.
um, exactly. Like one of the best ways to get what you want is to cry, right?
Works for me.
And that doesn't really play for AI. So I think that's obviously quite a negative frame for that.
Yeah. Well, I will say
But
that the data that you came up sort of is validated by what I discovered in my consumer survey that conducted towards the end of last year. This is with 1,000 consumers across geographies within North America,
yeah,
specifically, and across demographics. And it, we asked a few kind of tweak questions about more or less openness to communicating with smart IVAs versus people, and 55% of respondents, kind of to your point, are likely to immediately ask for a representative. And I think that's
yeah,
largely because they've been conditioned to think that
yeah,
automated services just can't solve their problem.
yeah,
But 71% of consumers are willing to speak to an IVA if it could accurately fulfill their customer service needs. So they get one good experience where they're like, oh, this isn't the old school press one for billing, two for in a doom loop. they actually have an experience where the thing acted in an agentic fashion and got it done, right?
Yeah.
They are going to be more likely to call back and be open to that to the tune of almost a quartile. And
Yeah.
one of the other findings is that at least 52% of consumers currently feel very comfortable or somewhat comfortable using voice assistants to interact with customer service. So we see the trend already going in that direction and sort of validating.
Yeah.
One really interesting thing that popped up is that we also asked questions around the channel, and this is a bit of a diversion, but 86% of Gen Z and younger millennial participants who never call their friends or family or anything, never use their phone for calling, prefer the phone specifically for customer service. So they're not on those digital self-service channels. But more on that survey to come. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but kind of
No, that
validating what
is
you
that
felt.
is yeah, that is such an interesting point as well. Um, I'm purely in the millennial, I'll do whatever I can to not have a conversation with the person.
Right.
Um, but I have friends, a lot of friends will send me voice notes, and I find that so interesting and sort of alien to me. I like hiding behind my keyboard, but I think this sort of we're returning to voice as a means of communication.
Yeah.
It's easier. It's just easier.
Wow,
And if
that's
you can
really
just decide that the fact that you feel a bit uncomfortable or a bit weird about it, it gets the job done quicker.
the voice notes thing is pretty interesting because it removes the dialoguing element. It removes the, okay, I'm saying something and waiting for you to respond and just leveraging the power of voice when you're like in a position where you can't type, right? So you're driving, you use a digital channel like chat, but you send a voice message. And maybe that's the next like multimodal effect is using chat, but sending voice recordings back and forth as opposed to
Yeah,
like,
I really see this happening with chatbots in particular. I think we're going to see chatbots being voice enabled so that you can sort of switch between how you want to do it because it's easier to explain yourself in voice. The reason my friends send me voice notes is because I'll ask them thing like, "How was your week?" And they're like, "Oh my god, let me tell you about it." I couldn't sit there and type out like all this stuff that happened to them.
and they don't trust the speech recognition in their actual, like, chat to get the words right, so they're just like, I'll send you my voice recording," and that's
Yeah, that's the easier thing to do. And then I'm typing back like 8,000 words. It doesn't but never mind.
That's so Kylie, that's so Kylie. Alright, real quick, what we know you had one, at least a few questions around how the agents are feeling about automation within the contact center, so these are the humans that are, often serving as the front line. What was the sentiment that your, trends report discovered?
Yeah, so I think in the whole, mixed responses. And again, this is coming from
Okay,
the leaders, not the agents themselves. So this is how the leaders think the agents are feeling. And
sure.
it's going to differ because some of these organizations are going to have AI pretty advanced, already pretty entrenched in the contact center. Some of them will never have used, anything more advanced than a touch tone IVR, for
Right.
example. Um, so, slightly, well, a decent amount tipping towards positive. So, 46% said that their agents feel that it's a positive thing. It'll make their jobs easier. 35% positive. It will remove repetitive calls. But we allowed people to sort of check as many boxes as they wanted on this question. And what's really interesting is that many of them checked a positive box and a negative box.
Of
So
course.
they might check, they feel positive because it'll make their jobs easier, but also negative in 32% of the case that they're worried that it will replace them. So, it feels like people aren't kind of one side of the fence or the other at the moment. We're still kind of
Well, like you said, there was
seeing.
a filter point in that respondents were largely managers of people. So you think of a team, I would almost venture to say that the strong agents see the positives because they have a little bit of that stress remediation coming from the removal or the handling of a lot of those road calls and allowing them to really shine where they're needed, which is in those ones that require a high level of empathy and understanding, right? Whereas maybe the weaker agents, less skilled agents probably see it as a replacement because they're doing the bare minimum. And if what they see or what they experience can accomplish the bare minimum, then they're in fear for their job. So, but going back to what you were talking about earlier about like job progression and evolution in the contact center, like those strong agents are going to be the ones that end up overseeing, learning the skill sets to sort of train and manage the bots,
Yeah,
which may end up being the entirety of a front line. So that makes a
yeah.
little bit of sense. I could see why there's pros and cons.
we've definitely seen that happening, right? Call center jobs are changing. People are moving into roles where perhaps they're overseeing AI agents rather than answering the calls themselves. Maybe they're doing a bit of both. But I think it's worth bearing in mind as well that it's I do agree that there's probably some sort of skill and enthusiasm for your work. We know that customer
Sure. Of
service representatives have varying degrees of commitment to their roles, right? Some
course.
some it's just
Every
click button,
employee. I think that can
some
be
it's
said about any role in any company. Yeah.
absolutely. But I think also exposure to AI is a big one. I think once you start working with an AI agent, you kind of realize where they're strong, where they're weak, how they augment your capabilities rather than replace you. And if you haven't seen that before, then you might be more scared. And again, if you've had a bad experience, you might be more scared. If you had a good experience, you might be more positive. So, I guess what's interesting is that it's just mixed at the moment
Yeah.
because it's so sort of unevenly deployed across industries, across companies. It's not yet the way that we have conversations with customer service.
Right.
Um, but
We see
it's getting
organizations taking action. We see changes happening. We see them within our clients. We see them within the industry, and that's promising to show that this isn't just a trend. This is actually a legitimate organizational change agent that is happening.
yeah,
Agent used, pun unintended,
yeah. And
within
there's
an
there's
enterprise.
There's something really exciting about, I think, this job shift as
Yeah.
well. Like, there will be, customer service agents who are people for the foreseeable. Like, I don't see this being completely automated
No.
away, and neither do I really think it should be. I think that a lot of brands could offer you a person to talk to as a part of their service rather than, they're there to reset your password or do these sort
Yeah.
of
Right.
mundane things for you. But I also think that there is kind of a ceiling that you hit as a customer service representative where you can get off the phones and get into management, or you can stay on the phones and keep having the relationship. And
Right.
if you really want to focus on those relationships, I think you can move into this sort of hybrid role where you're working to improve AI agents and guide AI agents and make sure that you have this feedback loop so that your customers are getting the best experience across all of your channels. And I think that's going to be really exciting for people to progress into these roles.
That's it. That's the quote. What a great place to end on as well. Kylie, it was awesome talking with you again. If you want to see more about these insights, be sure to take a look over at poly.ai and look for our customer trends report for 2025. Delightful speaking with you. Delightful comparing data.
Thanks
And
for
and we hope
having
to
me.
have you on the pod again real soon. Okay. For the rest of you, we'll talk to you
Amazing.
next week. Take care.